Hi, my name is Donna, and I am going to post a video today to warn people about a cult that exists in the United States. And I'm in Iowa, and there's one here on the south side of Des Moines that meets at South Ridge Mall. And they go by the name of Church of Christ. They might have a building, or they might rent a building, but it'll say Church of Christ meets here. This cult was started by a woman named Merie Weiss in the 1970s, and she was disfellowshipped by Churches of Christ, and so she went off and started her own. This cult claims to teach the Bible, but they greatly oppress men by man-made rules. And they teach, well, some of the rules that they have is they tell a husband and wife how they can have sex and when. They don't allow them to use birth control. And when it comes to raising your children in the cult, the children cannot associate with anyone outside of the cult. They cannot have friends outside the cult. They cannot date until they're 18. They cannot have a cell phone until they're 18. No social media, no Facebook. They don't celebrate holidays. They're not allowed to participate in sports at school or outside of school. Like I said, they can only associate with the kids that are within the cult. And the same with adults. The cult members cannot associate with your neighbors. You can't be friendly with your neighbors unless it's to convert them. And if your family's converted and one of them leaves, then the family shuns them. They are greatly discouraged not to associate with fallen away family members. And they also practice withdrawal, which is the same as disfellowship, that some people might know it by. And so if someone breaks some of the rules that they have, then they would be withdrawn from, which means that they could not partake of the communion. They could not talk to anyone in the cult, whether it's at a meeting or a church service or outside of a meeting. And even if you have grown children that are in the cult, and you have, say, a dad that's withdrawn from, those children are not to be able to communicate with their father whatsoever, unless it's very specific business instances. And one of the practices that's very damaging in this cult is they're taught to tattle on one another. Tattle on your spouse. If you know your spouse is doing something wrong and they have spoken, say, against some of the teaching, then you're supposed to turn them in, and vice versa. And so the practices in this cult are very oppressive, very manipulative. They have a practice of mandatory attendance to all of their functions, and their schedule is quite extensive. All day Sunday at the congregations, for here for instance in Des Moines, their church starts at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and their worship service lasts for about an hour and a half. And then they have a short break, and then they have a Bible study for another hour, and then they have a break for fellowship where they will split up to a couple different houses and have lunch together. And then they'll go back to a class at, say, 4:30 at night, and that may last till 5:30 or 6 p.m. And so that's all mandatory. If you've been a member for any amount of time and you don't show up to anything, if you don't show up to something, they will find out why. And if you don't have a good reason, then you will be rebuked in, say, one of their Tuesday night class. Or you will be talked to, or you might be sat down from any responsibility. They have, besides Sunday, they have a Tuesday night class at most congregations, a Thursday night class where they invite people that are not members. They call it their non-member class. They have a ladies class, and then they also go knocking on doors. The men usually 2 nights a week, and the women 1 day a week, for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And so they canvass the neighborhoods. And they have all this that's required, and they expect so much more from you. And you're never good enough. You never do enough. You never sacrifice enough. You never have, you're never good enough in what you do. And so, or you never push enough. If you're having, difficulties in something, might be told you need to push your flesh more. And there was an instance when I was pregnant with my 5th child, and the doctors gave me orders not to take stairs, and there was a preacher at that point who used the example of Epaphroditus, who nearly gave his life for serving God, and that was put out for me specifically, and I was expected to go down the stairs to be at the church service that happened to be downstairs, and I gave into pressure, and I hemorrhaged, ended up delivering my baby C-section at 6 to 8 weeks early. I hemorrhaged and nearly died and had to have transfusions. My daughter ended up with central sleep apnea because she was born prematurely, and that was a whole another story. Besides that, we had 3 small children at home, and my husband and I were told that we were not spiritual enough to receive help from the cult members to babysit our other children. And so we were just left, destitute and not knowing what to do, but we still didn't leave. That still didn't open our eyes enough. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago now that we had one of our children turned 18, and she's disabled, and the cult members told my husband that we were to bring her back home no matter what the legal costs were to us. And I said, no more. I'm done letting them control me. I'm done letting them tell me how to parent my children. And so I walked away, and I haven't looked back since. That was 4 years ago, but I was in the cult for about 36 years. And that's the thing, is the worst kind of control that they have is making you believe you can't leave. Making you believe that you can't leave the cult. They make you believe that there's nowhere else to go, that God doesn't hear anyone's prayer outside of this cult. And if you leave the cult, you leave God. That God can only be found within this cult. And so if you leave, you have no hope of salvation. That's what you're made to believe. Basically, you don't have a prayer. And it's very much like an abusive relationship, say between a man and wife, where the man might make a woman believe that nobody else would want her, that she's not going to have anywhere else to go. And so what does she do? She feels like she's stuck to stay and continue being subject to the abuse. And this cult turns very capable, smart people into man pleasers, people who will just give anything to be somebody within the cult. They teach you not to trust your intellect. In other words, if you a teaching comes your way and you're like, how can they teach that? That doesn't seem right. Well, you're told that feeling, that gut feeling, that intellect is something you have to ignore, because Jeremiah 17:9 says the heart's deceitful. It's desperately wicked, and you can't know it. So that's why you can't trust those feelings that you have. You just have to trust the cult members. And so, this cult keeps people tied down. It keeps people locked up, and it's as if you're captive, that you're sitting in a prison cell and the door is wide open and you don't leave because you don't feel like you can. You don't think you can. The brainwashing has you believing that there is nowhere else to go, and if you leave, you don't have hope. And so the dangerous thing about this cult is their oppression, is their brainwashing. They're making you believe that there is nowhere else to go and that God doesn't exist anywhere else. And that is the biggest lie that there is. And I like to, go over to Galatians chapter 1, verse 6, where it says, and I'll even quote it in King James Version, I marvel that you are so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Christ. And that's exactly what this cult has done, is they have perverted the gospel of Christ, and they have taken the grace of Christ out of it, because it's all about the sacrifice. It's all about the works. It's all about what are you going to do to get yourself to heaven. It's not about that Christ already gave his life, shed his blood for us on the cross, and he's paid for it. He's paid for our sins. And that's where they lack the understanding. This cult lacks the understanding of the greatest commandment that Christ gave us. And we all know what that is. It's love. The greatest commandment is love. And these people don't know what that is, because it's all about the power of leaders. It's all about how many they can get to follow, and about following their set of rules and regulations. And, and who can be somebody in the ranks. And unfortunately, I was part of that for way too long. And I regret all the years that I spent teaching these things. And that's why I want to put this video out there, is if I can help anyone else to walk away and to leave and never look back, and to know that God just wants a relationship with you, and there aren't these strings attached. And so I just want to let you know that you can have joy outside of this cult. There is no joy inside of it, because I know enough people that will tell you that they never knew it when they were in the cult. In the cult, you don't know the true God, the God that loves you, the God that cares about you, and the God that gave his son for you so that you can live life freely and you can worship him in freedom and not be captive in bondage. And that's the warning that I want to put out. I also want to let you know that there is a blog that is out there to help people like me and others that are looking for a way out, that have gotten out, that's looking for support. Kevin Harper has a blog that's called Merie Weiss Blogspot. And if you Google that, it's MERIEWIESS Blogspot. And it'll take you to his website, and his website has a lot of the history of Marie's cult, when she started it and what the circumstances were. And it also has many stories from people like me that have written their stories about leaving the cult in hopes that we can help others like us. And so I just want to thank Rising Sun Church that I go to now in Pleasant Hill, Iowa, because they have been the thing that has saved me, that saved my life, that showed me the right path to God and the love that I can have in a church. So don't give up. Don't give up when you think that you can't find a church that teaches truth after you walk away from this cult, because they're out there. Thank you, and please share this.